It's been a joy to be together with you during this time, to be able to fellowship and learn more about your journeys in the process of bringing trauma healing in ministry to those with whom you work and care for. And in this time, I'm hoping that you will get a glimpse of how Todd, my husband, and myself have been using arts as a part of trauma healing in the process of working with people throughout Asia. So let me just start by sharing with you a glimpse of one workshop experience we had. And there were two elderly people who broke away from the group as they were working on creating songs. And these two elders from one language community, there were 7 different language communities there. These two elders started composing a lament. And I asked about the meaning of the lament. And here is what one of the younger people who was in front of me crying in hearing this lament told me. This is a song to these people's children. The two of them live as adults in their children's homes. There, these elders are beaten and abused by their own children every day. These are things that they cannot say directly in their culture. But if they sing it, their children will hear, neighbors will hear, and they will understand how to correct the problem. Here are some of the text of the song. The song says, I raised you, I fed you, I diapered you, I loved you. After all my care that I have poured out for you, how have you cared for me? My heart is aching at this place of pain in my experience and my relationship. That was their lament. It did cause those who were around them from their language group to cry, as I mentioned, but also there was action that was taken to move them towards healing and better care. And that was a very exciting thing to see them as a community through this lament, this shared lament, to move together towards a place of healing for these elders who were being abused. A third elder joined them not long afterwards, saying he also had experienced the same thing, and he joined in this lament when they shared it a little later in the workshop time. Well, as we look at laments, we think about what it is. Well, it's actually a socially constructed form for expressing grief or sorrow. How many of you have, in your sessions or leading sessions, how many of you have actually used community laments or individual laments? Yeah, great, so many of us. So we all could have stories and testimonies about how effective it can be for people to enter into an opportunity to lament and express this pain. The two kinds of laments that I've mostly seen are either individual or community laments. And in different communities throughout Asia, there may be both of them, or there may be only one of them that is appropriate. In some groups, for example, when the expressive form is really identified, that art form that is appropriate for them to lament, it's a communication pathway for that sorrow, and it communicates meaningfully to the community members around them. What can happen, though, is, for example, this is a community lament. If you notice, it has singing and dancing in it. And with the dancing, that's quite significant. The movement that is used is very important. It's an important part of the process of showing that the community is lamenting. But there are other language groups that we work with that actually it's not appropriate to dance. And you cannot dance for a year after someone dies. So each group has a different focus or acceptable expression of their lament styles. In the same way, some groups are quite concerned when there's individual grief. And if that is an individual lament, that might not be appropriate in some communities. In some, it may be very appropriate. Now look at this picture here. Those of you from America or from some Western cultures, you may see this communication mechanism, and you see this is a funeral. Now, what seems inappropriate to you about this funeral? Okay, there's a guy on a cell phone, right? Now, let me tell you, when I have shown this picture to folks in Asia, that is not what they say. It's perfectly fine to be on a cell phone and be connecting with other people. That's not a problem. The problem is these people don't look like they're really emotion-filled in their expression of the passing of this person. Really important. I had a Thai friend say to me at one point, you know, I see these funerals from on TV or in movies, and people are all standing around, you know, the dead body or around the casket, looking really like solid, Thai word, very solid and expressionless. But where are their tears? And where is their wailing? Where is the wailing, the songs of pain that should be poured out from their hearts? So when we think about this, we cannot judge one another for the ways that we express or don't express our pain. And when we're working in other cultures, we need to find out what are their mechanisms for expressing the deep, heartfelt pains that they carry. Now, all of that brings us to a point that laments vary from culture to culture. This woman, an elderly woman who I spent quite a bit of time with, she would watch her grandchildren for her children while they went out and worked in the fields. And she talked to me about the lamenting she does to express the grandchildren's tears. So when the grandchildren cry, here's what she says in song. This is a song style. You're crying because you're missing your mother and father. She's singing this over them, by the way. You're missing them so much while they're gone and they're working in the fields. You're hungry for your mother's milk. You're longing for her to hold you. You want to be in your father's arms again. It's a lament given to the children, the crying children. Such a sweet gift. And as you see, do you see that the child is sound asleep? The child is sound asleep. It wasn't when I snapped, she closed her eyes or something. She had been crying so much. And as soon as that lullaby, that lamenting lullaby was sung over her, she was sound asleep, at peace. So here, as we look at all of this, we begin to see that not only are there special forms inside a culture, but inside their forms, cultures have certain patterns. They have structure or patterns that are very important for helping them identify something as a lament. And you can go and discover those. The insiders themselves will know what those forms are. And they may not be able to tell you every detail because they're insiders, so they know it so well. But they'll be able to create a representation of how you express things from your heart when you have a painful experience or a sorrow. Some things that we can look for as outsiders and maybe help them with are areas of repetition, watching for repetition. Others are rhythm, like there's a pattern that we see. I'm calling it a rhythm, but it's a kind of pattern. There's rhyming that happens, and that's similar sounds or visual images, and then special words, ideas, or symbols. And those might be metaphors, they might be similes, they might be other word constructs that are used in the community to create beauty in their expression. So as we think about this, that woman that I just showed you a picture of, she actually, her lament style started with a rhyming in the consonant, the beginning sound of every line. It was the same consonant sound in every line. And then each line could be 7 to 13 syllables in length. And she would create new lines, which is common in their culture, based on what she saw the children expressing and just helping them put to words that pain that she felt like they should articulate. So each structure might be quite different. Often when we think about laments, we think about music and song. And I've given you some examples of music and song. Sometimes, as you see on the left side, it's more church context, and the church brings that. And then sometimes it's more traditional, and that can look different, what is actually within the cultural context. But there are so many other art forms outside of song and dance. I was working with a group in Southeast Asia, and someone said to me, "Oh, this group, they can't draw. It's just terrible." And actually, they couldn't read drawings either. Very remote village. So I walked around the village, and I started seeing all these bundles. If you look on the left side, this is an example of one. These bundles of twigs and things from nature. And they were placed all over the village. And as I walked around, I started asking people, what about these bundles? People could tell me the meaning of every one. Oh, this one, this expresses sadness because this woman, she lost her child. And so this bundle was created by her and some neighbors and put on her door to be able to express that pain. There's expressions of joy as well in this culture. But for them, these bundles are the way that they articulate. And when they've created laments like this one on the door frame that I mentioned to you, it's with their own materials, their own forms of expression that are meaningful for them. And they communicate to the community as well. Another group we've worked with, they weave their stories into their fabric, quite beautiful stories, and very powerful to hear them just lay out a piece of cloth and tell a story to each other. Then we also have groups where food is very important. And I will not tell you, do we have some people here who might agree? You might. Yeah, and food becomes a communication tool. I was just talking with a family who was hoping to marry their daughter to a wealthy person in our area. Very interesting. So they went over to the parents, the guy's home that they were hoping she would marry him. And they realized that all the food that was brought out was communicating a very sad story to them. It was the parents' lament, and it was a lament, the parents of the young man. They were quite wealthy, and they brought out food that would not match, would not connect together. You would never serve it together. And these parents said to me, we knew right away it's not acceptable for their son to marry our daughter. And this was their sad tale to us. This was their lament of sadness to us, that in presenting these food combinations that could not go together, that our daughter could never go together with their son. So in every culture, there are these different mechanisms for lamenting. And so we want to watch for these, because they will actually connect on deeper levels with people in powerful ways. I'm going to take you just for a minute to work with the Hmong, or to, I don't know, did you pack your bags? Are you ready to go? We'll go way up into the mountain region. They live on mountainside areas. And they have 12 stitches. Each stitch has meaning. Each combination of stitches has meaning. They tell a lot through their stitching. And they, as well as several other groups, have said to me, we women, we wear our art. They create stories. They tell a lot about their own cultural experiences and their community and their family through what the women create. They have a funeral service. It's 3 days long, and in it there's dancing and a little bit of singing, but mostly this instrument is used. And with this instrument there is dance, and this is called a surrogate instrument, surrogate speech. So it speaks. They can hear it, and the Hmong can understand the meaning of everything that's said through this instrument. So this funeral service is a time when people come together and they grieve the loss of someone who died. And it's quite mournful in that way too. In the 1960s, though, there were some serious traumas that happened for the Hmong. And in that time frame, they took a traditional artistic form and used it for their lament style. So this visual art form is a storytelling style, and they represent community issues, folk tales, things like that in this storytelling style. But when the Hmong were faced with war and terrible, terrible torment, to the point where even, we just hear stories about them being lined up and just shot by officials. And they needed to escape from this place of torment, and they did, with a lot of persecution as well. These story cloths that they make are so powerful, and I have watched in communities where they bring out these story cloths, and one person after another will get up and tell the generational tale. Not all of them have gone through it, but even the youth, even the children, I have seen them get up, walk in front of a story cloth like this, and tell the story of the pain of their history. Now you will see them escaping. I don't know if you can read all of this. We call it visual literacy, if you can actually read the pictures that are made. But here we see people escaping, and on the right side you see the military people telling the Hmong actually they were sending them to prison and possibly out to be killed. And the trauma that they dealt with, it's very interesting to me. They read from the bottom up in this reading. Very important. So again, we're thinking about the rhythm of this, right? The patterns that we see. So as they read from the bottom up, you'll see up in the corner, the right corner, you'll see an airplane. And that is because so many of them were taken out of country and brought to other nations as refugees. And that's part of their story that they tell with their lamenting. Now, if we look at therapeutic value for this, we see that there are therapists who have researched the importance of left and right side brain, which Heather mentioned. We call that horizontal integration, so people have an opportunity to tell their story. But as well as that, we're looking at vertical integration too, which Bruce Perry talks about, where we're looking at that traumatized center, which is in the limbic system, and all of that keeps us from thinking rationally or having good cognitive hold on what is going on in our experience. So this retelling of the story, the Hmong Tell Me, is so healing for them and has been a great gift for them, not only individually for those elders who are still alive, but for the children who actually generationally are affected by this. So we have in the book that we use, either the classic and some of the others, we see Hebrew lament forms. And those are in poetry style and songs most often. It's unfortunate we don't have CDs or some way that we could hear those laments. That would be so special, I think, to know how they sounded. And yet I wonder, is it protecting us from taking those as the way and inviting the nations into expressing laments from their own hearts in ways that are meaningful for them? As we look at any Hebrew lament, we see that these are some parts of a lament, and many of you know this already. There's an address of some kind, usually to God, a request, a review of God's faithfulness, a complaint, and a statement of trust in God. Now, in these areas, in Hebrew laments, unfortunately, unless we're like a Hebrew scholar, we don't know all the rhyming system or the repetition of patterns. We can't grab all of that. But we can see this structure as a common part of the 67 psalms that are laments. That's over half of the psalms that have a category that are laments. It's the largest section of the psalms for a topic. So what I'd like you to do right now, on your tables, you see there's Psalm 80 there. This is a community lament where the community has gathered. And I'd like you to take a few minutes and see if you can find some of these sections within that lament. You can work together, help each other. Okay, it's all right if you're not finished. You can complete this later. But I wonder, were you able to see some patterns there? Did you find some patterns? Now, this is what I found. It may be different than what some of you found, and that's just fine, because we don't have the Hebrew version, and we don't really have Hebrew individuals to interview and find out how they really think about some of these lines. And we've come from translated material, which also can limit our ability to see things clearly. But these are some of what I noticed. And it's interesting to see how much overlap there is, back and forth, right? It's not just staying in one the whole time, not just addressing and then moving to request, but addressing and then request, and then reviewing God's faithfulness and back to addressing God. There's this fluidness in this particular form and format. Now, this helps us see one set of patterns. And in each of our cultures and experiences, we may have been aware of and exposed to lament styles or ways that we express grief or sadness. We may have our own way of doing that individually. But what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to take just a few minutes and think for yourself about what expressive form would be meaningful for me, for my own lament. What would that look like? What would it be like? Would I dance it? We have groups, actually in Southeast Asia, they have to dramatize their grief in community. That's how they do it. It's a part of the cultural framework. And they dramatize their rituals, but they also dramatize their grief and laments as well. So think for yourself. It could be a certain musical style. It could be rituals that you have been exposed to that really help you to be able to express your pain to God. But think about what form would be the most impacting for you personally for expressing a lament, and what are some of the structures or patterns you might know of in that form. So I'm just going to give you about 2 minutes just to think about that for yourself, and then we'll move on to another activity together. Own lamenting style. And what I'd like you to do is to talk with others at your table. We've had some shared experiences this week in hearing about traumas and sharing in each other's traumas or challenges or griefs or losses. What I'd like you to do is together choose one expressive form that you would like to use together. It can be any form that you'd like. And if you feel like you cannot decide on one collectively, you can use this Hebrew lament form to create a poem if you want, or a song. And then I'd like you to list together some of the wounded areas you would want to express in a lament, how you'd want to express that. And then, using the appropriate structure, for example, if you're going to do a drama, thinking about how you would dramatize that appropriately with that expressive form that you've chosen. So it doesn't have to be from all of your cultural experiences, but it should be at least from one person's at your table so that you can communicate that well together. All right? I'm going to give you about 25 minutes to do this, and I want to invite you to work together. Some of you may already know there are others in the room who have shared pain with you from your work experience or life experience. If you feel like it would be better for you to go and be with those people, you may do that as well, so that you can meet with someone who you feel can lament in the same style or from heart with you. Okay? So go ahead. My husband Todd, who's over here on the side, and myself will be available, and we can help if you feel stuck in any way or have any questions. All right? Thank you. All right. I'll let you be free to start working. I do want to let you know, on your tables there are art supplies. If you decide you want to do a lament that you want to use a big sheet of paper for, you can pull one of the big sheets off of these paper holders. Flip charts. There it is. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to join together now as a larger group. So I'll call you back. And I know some of you are very anxious to share what you've created or what God's put on your heart. You do not have to share, just so you know. There's no pressure about it. But we want to give time for those folks who do want to share with us. I would encourage you to come up front to share with the larger group, and we have some mics as well to help if there are several folks. All right? Okay, so let's just come back together. I know. It's so exciting. We're having so much fun. You share it? Okay. All right. All right, so let's come back together. Our first table group is going to share with us what they created, and I'll just ask you to stop discussing what you're planning to do, and just listen to this particular group and what they want to share, what they created. All right?
Thank you. So our group talked about the feeling of hopelessness in terms of heart wounds and the things that we have seen in the various contexts that we've been in. And so each one of us took a piece of that, and we put together a quilt. So this is our quilt. So we've talked about generational trauma and the things that can occur in that, the brokenness, the suffering. We've talked about the world and how God is crying over what occurs around the world when we look at war and the violence and suffering that comes with that. We've talked about joblessness and looking at men who are not able to provide for their families and the challenges that come from that in terms of addiction and gangs and different activities. And we've talked about being alone in the world, surrounded by people, but feeling like we're all alone. We looked at children and the things that occur for them, feeling displaced or abandoned, rejected. And just, again, looking at the suffering that occurs in the center and all the effects that spread out outside of that. Do you guys have anything else to add? Okay. Thank you.
Todd and I worked with deaf this past year, very special opportunity working with the deaf community. They have a whole rhyming system that's all with hand shapes. But one thing that they do when they're thanking others for sharing something very deep is they go like this. So just so you know, if you want to, instead of, you can clap, that's fine. But if you want to show gratitude for just the depth of the emotion that was shared in that, you can just do this. All right? Okay, who else would like to share? Here they come. All right.
This way? Okay, come over here. All right, so we were just talking about how in this world we feel like we have one foot in the light and we have one foot in the dark, and that we feel very pulled at times in both ways, and that sometimes we're pulled more to one direction than the other. So this represents our little self being halfway in the light and halfway in the dark. On this side, we have chains that are binding our man, and we have tears, we have sadness, we have storms that are very violent, we have broken hearts, we have shame, darkness, death, danger. We aren't allowed to go, we feel stuck, closed doors. We have a bird that is not allowed to fly, that is in a cage. Here we have a bird that is free to fly. We have celebration. We have sunshine with light. We have warmth. We have love. We have God's word. We have, again, light. We have growth and beauty. And we have open doors. We have happiness and joy. We have open roads, and we are free to travel where we want to go. And we have, we live in this constant tension. We feel that oftentimes we focus on one and not the other, and it's hard to be present. But in moving forward, she asked us to think about what it is to be moving forward, thinking about, as much as that's a very hard place to be, how we can see God in different ways, because we have to live in both ways, and that there's actually a beauty in living with a foot in both sides of that world. So that's it.
All right. Anyone else want to share? Yes. Oh, okay. So this group first, then Brian's group.
Is this one also on?
It is on. Yes.
Okay. We've got, we wanted to do something that acknowledged how music also draws this out of us, but none of us are musicians, so we listen to other people's music. And then we decided, as we took a long time talking about music, we decided to write something as well, because we all write. And we each took a piece and wrote it and didn't know what the others were writing, although we had agreed on a common theme of feeling abandoned. And this is what came out. Praise God. Creator God, who brought me to life and nursed me from birth, you are my loving parent, my family. Emmanuel, God with us, stand up from your throne and come near. Come near to your solitary one, your child. You do not forget. Let me see your face and know your presence. Emmanuel, Emmanuel, God is with us. O Lord, where are you? Where did you go? I'm left here all alone. I cannot feel your presence. Why have you left me? Emmanuel, stand up from your throne and come near. Come near to me, the solitary one, your child. You do not forget. Let me see your face and know your presence. You knew me before I was born. You will never leave me or forsake me. You have kept me to this day. Even if all people leave me, you will never. Amen.
All right. Thank you so much. Brian is calling his table to
My table.
come up here.
My people, my peeps. We took it as each one was to write one phrase of complaint and then one phrase of whatever other part they wanted of the lament. And so it kind of all started coming together. And then we wanted a melody, but they looked at me. And so what I decided is I would do this in the Tamang song style, which is Tamang are the people group that we helped with the translation on. They live in Nepal. There's about 1 million of them. So it's a sort of a start and stop kind of thing. So here we go. I'm going to try. Oh Lord, who says I love you? What were you thinking? Taking them away. I needed more time with them. Why, dear Lord, would you take someone so close to me? Why didn't you answer my prayer request in my favor? Help me understand why I've suffered such a loss. Why didn't you close your ears to our pleading? O God of mystery, God of time, you hold all things together. Let me feel, see, and hear the love you have for me. You have been our fortress and help. I turn to you, O Lord, when I have no hope. Give me peace, joy, and trust again in the midst of all this.
Wow, thank you so much. Who else would like to share?
So we had several different things at our table, and we're going to share some of those. The first is just an image that means, I don't know, it's representative of trauma and pain, and especially as we think of it in terms of war as well, because on the right, it is torn like a flag that has seen a lot of storms and battle, and yeah, I don't know, it's an image that means a lot to me.
And blood coming from teared heart. And we also talked at our table about Christians that are persecuted all over the world or have been persecuted. And we had an analogy that Jesus was the first one who was persecuted so much. And as I shared yesterday, my country had been persecuted for 70 years. And God has blessed me with a great blessing to be a Christian in the 5th generation. And we never had a gap in between all of my generations. So we all were Christians. Most of my fathers, my grandfathers and relatives were even pastors in those difficult times. So a lot of the persecution I felt even on myself and on the stories like Hebrew people were sharing from generation to generation to generation. And that's how I feel like to be a Christian that came out from Soviet Union times. And the interesting thing about us being Christians, I shared at the table that Christians being persecuted in our countries, they never asked to be taken out of these circumstances. They asked to grow in these circumstances closer to God, and for God to be in the midst of all this darkness with them. So we wrote prayer like this too. Oh Lord, how long will you what is that word? Leave me. How long? I forgot that word in English. Okay. Sorry, guys, once again. Sorry, because I have this in Russian here. I'm trying a few words in English, so chance number 2. Oh Lord, how long will you leave me? Oh Lord, how long will we be persecuted? How long will we be forgotten by you forever? How long will you hide your face from me? Oh Lord, help us to be strong. Help us to go through these circumstances. We do not ask you to deliver us from there, but we want you to be in the midst of this with us. We ask you through these circumstances to bring closer to you, because you are our why did I write it in Russian? Skala. Because you are our Skala. Okay. And please bring us closer to you. Help us through these circumstances to know you closer and to be able to be a witness to others. Let you be glorified in our country in the midst of these circumstances, because you are the only great God and you are the only hope that we have in the circumstances without hope. Thank you.
Who else would like to share? Yeah? Okay. Oops. We have more. Oh, we have so many coming. Okay, let's do this table first and then that table next. Do others want to share too? Oh, yeah, and you guys too. Okay, great.
We determined at our table that we were word people. We were not very artistic people, but we really loved words. Some of you guys are really good at coming up with really good words, sentence structure. But we decided as we went around the table, we represent Uganda, Guatemala, Philadelphia, Southern United States. So lots of varied backgrounds, but as we came up with words, there were similar words. And we decided, Lesbia decided, helped us decide, to incorporate colors with our words. So we addressed our God in purple for royalty, majesty. We addressed our complaints, the words that we came up with that were similar: hopelessness, brokenness, the vulnerability of children, the displacement of our families, poverty. And we brought our complaints to God through those words and through those colors. Then we decided to remember God's faithfulness in green because it symbolized life and life-giving words. So we remembered the time that He has come through for us and for the Israelites. We listed some deliverance, sustenance, the Prince of Peace when we were facing war. We made our request in this blue color or teal color, and we wrote those around our complaints. Deliver us, save us, make your presence known. And then finally we put our trust in the Lord in yellow for hope. So our word art.
Okay, next group. Oh, Mark also? Oh, okay, Mark is next. Oh, okay.
Our group laments for domestic abuse within the church. Let me just show you, to explain what is at the rear, at the back of the room. Church where we see light and we see joy, we see music. But in reality, what is covering is a darker picture where there is pain. And in fact, within that, it's very difficult to read the word pain because it can't be seen so often. But our hope and our desire and our call to God within our lament is to a different place. It's not the same color as the first picture. We're not necessarily going to be going back to what was, but rather to a new place, a different place. Red is a color that represents the sacrificial blood of Christ that brings righteousness, reconciliation, and healing. And red is a color that represents a new dawn. But also there's a very large question mark there because we're crying out to God saying, what is that way forward? What are you doing here, God? What must we do? And how can we be part of it?
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. All right, next group to share.
So our table represents USA, Nicaragua, and Nigeria. From our own countries, as well as what we're hearing, I would say the theme was abuse of power, corruption in government, and how that silences voice, and also the oppression of women and children and complicity within the churches of abuse of women. And so we had a mastermind lyric writer, James, and we have a professional rapper. Well, I don't know if he's professional. I think he is. I think he is. So he's going to rap, but we need you to hold down the beat, please.
Yes, and we are going to do it together. So I ask us to stand up. Okay. And we are going to do that. Give me a clap that way. One. Yeah. One. Okay. That's the rhythm now. No, you're getting too fast. Do it. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Now I go. Why God in our country does corruption overwhelm? Freedom is nowhere. There is only but lies. We suffer in silence. Our government is nowhere. Dun, da, da. Ta 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 ta. Para pa 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 pa. Para ta 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 ta. Now 2. Courage is oppressed by one who know not. Women have suffered much. There is no compromise. Ta 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 ta. Ta la la ta 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 ta. Ba ba ra ba ba ba. Ta la la la. Now, final now. Unfair is the pain, producing our strength. In you, O God, is where we must go. In you, O God, is where we must go.
Thank you, Mark. All right. We have 2 more who really want to share with us. Thank you so much, Mark. Oh, boy, the talent in this room is just awesome, you guys. Wow. So Esther will share with us now.
Thank you. Another up? No. This is a lament for the countries that are experiencing war, a lot of killings, a lot of injustice. So our lament to the Lord is, my Father in heaven, for how long shall we see dead bodies of our beloved people laid down, killed before us, our properties destroyed, our farms destroyed, our cattle killed, people forced to kill their beloved ones? Many of them wish they never did this. Women are raped, wells are poisoned, children are destroyed of their childhood, left as orphaned. They have to take care of their young ones. Lord, for how long? Dear God, heal us from these nightmares, the images and memories of pain. Help us start all over again. Pour out your grace to be able to forgive these that have hurt us so much. Lord, take care of the children that have lost their childhood. For how long shall we sing and dance, but sing songs of pain, dances of pain, tying our stomachs so tight because we are too weak to hold ourselves up? Father, for how long? Lord, you have been with our forefathers. You've helped them build our land. Help us too be able to rebuild our lands, restore our land, renew our hearts. Help us be fertile ground for your word. Because the pain we've had is too much, that we cannot be able to listen and to your word and be able to yield fruit without your strength. Help us, Lord. O Lord God, you ended the war. We know you are strong and close to those that mourn and bind up their wounded hearts. We surrender to you for your complete healing. Thank you.
All right, this is the last sharing before we go to lunch. After they share, I'm going to ask you to turn at your tables and at least one person just to pray and close your time of sharing and lamenting together. All right?
Well, our table did something a little different. We created a sculpture, and we realized that despite lots of cultural, geographic differences, the one thing that we wanted to lament was the lack of lament that happens in our culture. So as we talked about it, we had an image of blood. And when blood is lacking oxygen, whether it's being blocked or something is preventing oxygen from happening, it turns blue. So on the outside, we had blue representing what happens when you don't lament. But our bodies and ourselves find ways of releasing our trauma, and that can happen through really unhealthy ways, like violence and abuse. We see it in some of the theological expressions, if God wills or it is well, which are true, but not necessarily encompassing our full truth. And then we made this red represents what happens when oxygen enters our blood. It changes color. And like lament is almost a freeing, a releasing and allowing oxygen to come into our bodies, into our souls. It creates a change of color and it creates an openness. So we have kind of a representation of openness. Both your eyes are open and your mouth is open.
Thank you. Wow. I wish we had time to hear from each one of us. And I'm sorry that we didn't get to hear from others who also prepared a lament to share. What I'd like you to do just for a couple minutes at your table, I'd like you to turn back and in your group together, just pray. One person can pray just to close this time, thinking about the lamenting you've done, what you've offered to God, and how you want to move forward before His throne and into this day. Lord, thank you so much for the gift of community. Thank you for the ways you have represented that to us so well through God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Thank you for inviting us into your community of hope and healing. But Lord, thank you for hearing our pains and for receiving those, for the pain that we bear in this earthly world, for the challenges that we face. And Lord, for these laments, as we offer them up to you on this holy ground, as we've shared our struggles and challenges, please meet us in this day. Meet us in these areas of struggle and pain and those we continue to face. Thank you that you promise to turn to us and hear our cries. Thank you that you are Emmanuel, God with us. And even in the midst of those words of truth, thank you that you allow us to be real with our feelings and to express the pain and struggle that we have in this life. We're so grateful, Lord, for this process of being together in community and bringing these areas of pain before you. We pray that as you meet us in this day, that all that we do will not only glorify you, but that we will not miss sight of your presence with us and all the ways that you want to speak to us and care for us and minister to us in this day. Thank you, Father God, through Jesus Christ. Amen.